today, one topic that has come up quite a bit is really how we can look at where the intersection of data management and customer experience kind of come together. And what I've found is what Mike was talking about earlier today, and he compared the CDP technology to like RAM and ROM. We see that this is a hot topic of how do we integrate this type of capability in with our data warehouses, in with these cloud data platforms. And so we're going to dig in a little further into this topic during this session. And I'm really excited because I want to be able to welcome to this stage in this panel Patrick Crosby from Snowflake and Rio Longacre from Slalom. So before we get going, Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. Been here for the last couple of days working with the team at Telium and really growing the partnership. So I'm at Snowflake. I lead tech alliances specifically for our MarTech and AdTech partners. And Snowflake, if you're not familiar, we are the AI data cloud. We are helping organizations mobilize their data with near unlimited concurrency, performance, and scale. Specifically for marketing, we're helping brands as well as a lot of innovative marketing solutions like Telium, like Braze, just deliver unique customer experiences, all the things that we've talked about a lot at this conference. And we're doing that ultimately by providing the ability to take a lot of the data that customers already have in Snowflake and activate that through the marketing solutions that they're familiar with. So excited to be here and looking forward to the panel.
Rio?
Yeah, Matthew, Patrick, pleasure to be up here with you. It's an honor. Rio Longacre, as you heard earlier, I lead our capability for advertising marketing transformation. Now, a lot of that work is AdTech, MarTech advisory. I think under my remit, there's around 90-ish different like MarTech, AdTech partners, ISVs that we manage, and we're actually Snowflake's #1 SI partner, and we've done a lot of work with you guys for many years. So it's, like I said, great to be up here with the two of you. For those of you who don't know Slalom, we're a $3 billion systems integrator and consulting firm, headquartered in Seattle, but we have offices in 8 countries. We have about 12,000 people, I believe last time I checked, and I've been at Slalom about 10 years.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. I mean, I think the biggest thing we can look at is, as Jeff pointed out earlier today in the keynote, most enterprises that we're working with have, on average, over 400 different systems that they're integrating. And when we look at the efficient and effective consolidation of customer data, it's super critical to be able to understand, assimilate, and bring this data together. So first question to you guys is, when you think about how integrating these types of platforms, CDPs with CDPs, because the customer data warehouse, also known as cloud data platform, we want to explore this topic a little bit. So first off, I'd say, how can integrating these types of platforms really enhance real-time engagement? I'll pass it to Patrick first.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things that we're seeing more and more is just all the innovative things that customers are doing, leveraging data in Snowflake to drive these marketing use cases. What we recently released with Telium, so the Telium team built an amazing integration leveraging Snowpipe streaming, and specifically this allows you to in a real-time, low latency and efficient way, take all of the data that you're collecting across websites, mobile apps, and other platforms through Telium and deliver that into Snowflake, such as you can run things like ML and AI workloads. And so from a CDP perspective, this starts to unlock a series of new use cases that you could have your data science team leveraging that customer data alongside enterprise data or vendor data or other third-party insights that they have in Snowflake. So think of all the things that you can do there. And then we've also worked with the Telium team, and we've released the bidirectional connection. So now taking those insights that are created in Snowflake and piping those back into Telium such that you can leverage that. So this unlocks a ton of new use cases, and now you're starting to think of this vision of bringing together those core capabilities of a customer data platform and being able to use the compute layer, the performance, the scale of a cloud data platform and do that in a seamless way. So that's what's really exciting, specifically about the partnership that we have here.
It's interesting, the whole concept of real time. For many years, everyone was talking about how they wanted to have real-time personalization, real-time marketing, and I think the reality is like most organizations really weren't able to do it. I mean, it's one thing to say it's been a lot harder. You look at the way data is architected, the way it's stored, the way that it's the way that it's connected, right? It's just really been challenging. So what gets me very excited about this partnership here, Snowflake plus Telium, where you have the data warehouse native architecture, where you have an architecture connected by API, where you have, we'll get into this more later, places to store consented data where you're deciding what's stored where. You're easily able to activate it across different use cases, across a broader customer journey than I think we've seen previously. I think that gets really exciting. And I think the timing's good, right? Cookies are going away, eventually, right? And with all this signal loss, we're already seeing it, right? I mean, like, as signal loss increases when cookies go away, like, what's a good marketer to do, right? I mean, it gets much harder to do things that we take for granted, like retargeting. So if you're not going to be able to retarget anymore, what do you use to substitute for that? Well, I mean, first-party data is going to be the solution in many of these instances. So in order to do that, it has to be in a place where it's easily accessible.
Yep.
So this architecture really lends itself well to that. And this is for buy side and sell side too. I think a lot of people lose sight of that. Like, for example, like we're working with a telco right now. We're able to activate audiences from CDP. We're able to build the audiences, then get pushed to DSP. And we're seeing they convert significantly better, for about 9% higher ROAS than the third-party cookie audiences they were buying previously from DSP. And additionally, some testing we're doing with publishers now, we're seeing about a 31% lower CPM on cookie list, ID list traffic going in terms of how much they're able to sell their inventory for. So I think what's interesting is by having the data accessible so they can then, let's say, match it in a clean room, for example, I think it's opening up a lot of possibilities to do some really interesting things.
Yeah.
So we're excited. I mean, kind of as ad tech and martech crash together, right? This is very timely.
Yeah,
And
there are a couple of points there. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, one of the things I think is really interesting is to your point, to both of your points. Last week on stage at the DV event in London, we had TUI, which is the largest travel and leisure company on the planet. And they were talking about doing this at scale. And for them, they have 90 million profiles where they collect 1,300 data points per profile. And so whenever we looked at the amount of data to do what you're talking about, they've got 450 terabytes of information. So when we think about this problem of connecting all that data to the activation layer, that amount of data and being able to do this, and if someone comes onto a site, they may just be researching a trip. And in their use case, they were talking about a research type of intent. It's very different than a purchasing and booking intent. And so with the collision of these two things, it's how do you fully understand the customer journey, create those personalized experiences, and be able to act on it. So, I think when we think about real time, kind of to pick into that a little deeper, I think about that is the most overused word I think I've heard in IT in 25 years, right?
Maybe composable is.
Yeah, well, not composable. To me, that one's now becoming. But like I think real time, it's in the context of customer experience and engagement. The AI summit last week, the Snowflake summit, was going on in San Francisco. There was a significant focus on customer experience, MarTech, C360. So one thing I would like to ask you guys is like, how can the integration of the customer and cloud data platforms really enhance that real-time engagement? You were starting to talk about it, but let's go a little bit deeper into that, the challenges and kind of where you see the outcomes coming from that.
It's interesting. I mean, I was joking about composable being overused. I think it is it's used a lot. And in fact, I think I saw a meme yesterday about it being composable CDPs. They're hot, right? I mean, it is right now. But I think it is for a reason. As turn back a few years, right? There was a first wave of like CDP activations that's maybe started in 2017 and went through like about a year and a half ago. And COVID was when that crested, right? When a lot of organizations thought, wow, like we can't actually have people come into our stores, or we can't meet with them anymore, so we need to put customer data in a place, right? So, but what's interesting, I think, about that first wave of, let's say, CDP activations, a lot of them didn't meet expectations. I think a big reason why was, they were spun up by marketing alone, usually to bypass IT, right? Because everyone was remote, so like, we can't work with IT. Let's just put a credit card down, stand up a CDP, upload a file, and then try to knock out some marketing use cases. I think it had limited success. So what I think is really interesting about what we're seeing right now is every single time we get brought in to solve what's ostensibly a CDP question, but really is a customer data question, it's much broader in its remit, which I think is great. It's not just we want to solve for this one thing. It's like we want to actually find the best way to store and architect our customer data, so we can do things like real-time activation, for example. We want to do it in a privacy-first way. We want to do it so we're only storing consented data. We want to do it in a way where we're minimizing what we're paying in terms of cloud costs for either computer storage. So it's interesting that these are broader questions, and IT is always there now. And I think because IT is there, the CIO is there, and CIO, one of the CIO's jobs is to be the steward of the company's data, right? So there's always a privacy-centric discussion right now. So, and I think that's a really good thing. That's going to help these organizations future-proof themselves as, we'll get into privacy in a little bit, but you can't, that's what the elephant in the room, right, is these privacy laws, whether it's CCPA, CPRA, you have DMA, GDPR, DMA, and TSA, it's like an alphabet soup and all over the place. So they're changing all the time. So I think being aware of those and building an architecture that can keep you compliant is super important.
Yeah. I think one of the things you've referenced, Rio, is just there's the convergence of ad tech and martech. There's this need for consent and privacy. There's this idea of scalability and being able to build for scale and have the type of, the thinking of what the business is going to look like down the road. All of those aspects, I think, have really driven this architecture that largely gets described as composable, where people are leveraging a scalable data platform in conjunction with their CDP. One of the things, though, that's been outside of that has been real-time use cases. And so a lot of customers have come to us and said, hey, how do I actually drive real-time use cases leveraging my CDP and Snowflake? And we've had limited capabilities there. I think what's happened because of that customer demand is we've been working with partners, we've been working with organizations like Telium to unlock those real-time use cases. So now this streaming integration does that. Now you're able to do that on the activation side. And so that's going to bring the scalability, the ability to have marketing and advertising use cases coming together, the ability to have secure, governed platforms. All of that comes together, and now you're able to do real time as well. So I think that's what's really interesting about this, and so some of those use cases get unlocked.
And I think whenever I look at the different things, real time, has popped up several times today, and just thinking about the complexity of what real time is, and the great presentation we had from DirecTV, the panel discussion, and thinking about how do you offer up a complicated set of offerings? Like, how do you do this at scale in the moment? How do you tailor an experience in the moment? It's incredibly difficult because the moment is gone. It's like if I were here today talking about the fajitas last night, which were quite good, in the session we had, how relevant is that for the room, right? It's like to bring up something that is in the past doesn't help me in the current. And when we think about this with our interactions and what Mike was saying earlier during his keynote, the customer is having a conversation with you through these digital properties, and they want the reaction, they want the response and the engagement to almost be that conversation back from the digital interface. And so I think about that real time, and I look at the needs, and then I look at what the output is. And if you have solid real-time engagement, that's conversational, that's accurate and to the point, conversion rates are higher, customer engagement and loyalty are better. But I think one of the big areas that we look at is data privacy. And I know the 3M team, when they were up, were talking about and I wrote it down, that data privacy is a fundamental right? It's a very interesting thing to think about, because when they were positioning on the architecture slides the integration of Telium and Snowflake, it was pretty neat to see how that management of that right is being taken seriously by them as a brand. So, California is basically ground zero for data privacy, or so I thought, until I was in Tokyo a couple weeks ago, and data privacy is ground zero there, right? It's like you go through these different countries, everyone feels as though the data has to be secure, protected, and held, to the utmost, with the utmost professionalism and the legal compliance to the law. So whenever I think about data privacy, compliance, and those types of things, and what Telium and Snowflake are doing together, looking at how Slalom can work with these services, integrating these platforms, how do you feel like we adhere to these standards of data privacy and compliance while we're doing these things to enable this real-time activation? And Rio, I'll ask you to reply first.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So when looking at privacy, I think you can't look at it without consent. They really do go hand in hand. And what I like about this architecture that we've been talking about, right? If you think about, okay, like we want to be able to store data, but only the data we need to store, right? We need to store it in the right places so we can do the right things and activate in the right use cases, right? I mean, that's fundamentally what you want to do. Now, it's easier said than done. So I think that when you're looking at gathering event data, putting it in a CDP, consent data is included there, and you're then able to decide, what do we want to store in the data warehouse? What do we not want to store? I think what you don't want to store is just as important as what you store for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, so you're compliant with these laws, obviously, but then I think number two, if you want to actually build things, let's say, if the data warehouse becomes a source system where you're going to build your AI applications on top of, right? You can then do that a lot easier, not worried about potentially in the future, like running afoul of any privacy laws for AI governance. That's going to become a huge thing, by the way. In Colorado, we recently passed a law for giving people the right to sue organizations for using their PII to build AI models. I think we're going to see more and more of that. So I think future-proofing and preparing for that is going to be really critical. I also think that when looking at cost for the cloud, I mean, limiting what you're storing in data warehouse, using consent as one of the parameters for deciding, and then additionally, maybe not sending event data there, right? I think those things cut down on what you're transferring back and forth and what you're ultimately storing will cut down your cloud bills, which I think is really going to be a good thing and very useful. And then I guess my closing thought on this would be that, I think that was Tim Cook who said that, by the way, that privacy is a fundamental human right. I mean, you could argue maybe Apple's just doing that to market, right? But it is an important thing, and having the right architecture to prepare for that, whether it's preparing for future AI governance or it's preparing, like, let's say, like you're going to get DSARs, if domain subject access requests or people are going to be saying, let me know everything you've ever stored about me and what you've done with it. You need to be able to prepare to comply with those as well, and that's part of CCPA.
So I was visiting a large banking client in New York several months ago, and they were using a CDP. One of the use cases they had was centered around privacy, consent. Obviously, they need to make sure they're getting consented data. They're not running afoul of any of the privacy laws. The other layer that they had was this idea of, there's another set of regulations around targeting related to financial services. And so they needed to be able to actually split out different types of segmentation. So they wanted segmentation for transactional interactions, and that needed to be different than how they segmented or targeted customers for marketing purposes, because there's certain features they can't include. So when you start to combine all of these different things, when you think about the regulated industries where you, in addition to your privacy and consent laws and restrictions, you need to now have, in the health and healthcare space, HIPAA, in financial services, another network. So this gets really complicated very quickly. And so in addition to making sure you've got consented data, along that entire chain, there is the need to have governed, secure, and privacy-centric policies. And I think bringing solutions like this together allows you to actually navigate those unique complexities.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think about the way you start to mix all these components together, and you think that, okay, now if I've got my data working to better benefit the activation and I'm abiding by consent, then I have better CX, right? And that will lead to happier customers. And I know Mike had talked about as well, like being able to look at if you can opt in and opt out, that can be a measure of trust, right, from a company. But the more data you give to these brands, the better experience you expect in return. And there's certain brands that I give overshare information with, but I do have confidence in their ability to protect it and the ability to keep it and use it responsibly, which makes me want to give them more because the experiences get better for me over time. And so I think that sort of concept and the ability to do this is really where our customers want to go. And I think one big area where we just keep hearing, and it wouldn't be a conference if we didn't talk about it, is AI, right? So if you take all of these different topics we're talking about now, and you start to think about how generative AI, how AI and ML can all be sort of put together, I think one of the things that was very interesting that Stephen from Eli Lilly was talking about a little while ago was talking about that supply chain and being able to look at the data, the metadata, being able to look at how to sort identity and all those different things before you start doing anything with AI or ML. It's making sure you've got really solid understanding that the data that you have is being handled with respect, integrity, and the law, and that it's being leveraged appropriately to accomplish the goal. And whenever I look at the things around the hot topics of Snowflake Summit last week, the stuff we were talking about in London, seems like everybody's really just grabbing on to how they can embrace AI to make their organizations more efficient, to help drive things around customer support, maybe anomaly detection, fraud detection. There's a lot of ways that that's going to feed and help them grow and really do more with less or become more efficient. So as we've been talking about this concept, for you guys, when we think about how you see the role of these platforms evolving, right? We've talked about how we can put them together, but how do you see it evolving in the context of AI-driven marketing strategy?
I think one of the things, so if you think of, I'd say fast fashion brands are sort of at the forefront of this. One of the things that they're doing is they are starting to really couple CX, customer experience, with a lot of the things related to supply chain, vendor management, inventory. So, in a typical, fast fashion, like literally they're not buying or producing the product until there's actual demand. Either someone's made a purchase or there's enough clicks to demonstrate that there's going to be a demand curve. And so if you're building out a CX experience where you need to have that customer data, they viewed a product, they added to cart, they've ordered a product, but you also need to have that sit alongside, does my vendor have the supply for this? Can they make it? Can I produce it? And that's actually going to interplay. So you need to now be able to say, well, do I want to change the actual recommendation engine to deprioritize this product because I don't have the supply? Do I want to raise the price to get the demand curve to bend? So there's all sorts of interesting things that you can do both from a predictive standpoint as well as a supply chain management standpoint when you start to think of customer experience as not just the front end of your business, but operating across the entire end-to-end structure of your business. And so those types of things are becoming more and more common. And this works when you now have your customer data asset sitting right alongside your enterprise data and connected to third-party insights that you may be pulling in from vendors or suppliers. And so those are the types of use cases that I think are really interesting, that really start to expand what we've thought of historically as brands for customer experience and how that works with the rest of the business.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to say something a little provocative. I actually think customer experience, at least the way that we've looked at it for the past 15 years, is dead. And what I mean by that is like how do we define customer experience before? Oh, we'll do a secret shopper. We'll send out a couple researchers. We'll sit in your store. We'll listen to any of your calls in your contact center. I'm not saying that stuff doesn't happen anymore, but people are not interested in buying that now, right? Brands really aren't coming to us and saying, like, we want to do that now. Part of the reason why is that maybe like we kind of won, and what I mean by that is like brands have acknowledged we need this, it's important. We need to probably have internal teams that focus on this to a certain extent. But I think also it's taken a turn where organizations really want to focus on things that drive top-line revenue, period. They want to then look at customer experiences. How can we gather as much information and intelligence we have using tools, whether it's looking at clickstream data, looking at CRM data, looking at POS data. How can we combine that together in one place? And how can we do some things you just talked about? How can we apply ML models to it to really understand who are our most valuable customers? How can we look to see how do we engage with them across what channels? And how can we maybe even build AI applications to support them better when they call up with instead of having them talk to an agent, maybe have tier 1 and tier 2 just speak with a bot, or maybe service their needs better, more cost effectively. I think that's where CX is today, where it's how can we build this data layer, which now you can do with these new tools and integrations. How can we activate that across different places in the customer journey in order to affect the actions that we want to see, whether it's a purchase, whether it's a conversion, whether it's and depending on your business, it might be different things. But those are the types of things we're getting asked every day. It's not we want to build a journey, build us 5 personas. So I think customer experience really has turned on its head in the last, I think that was already happening, but the last 2 years has completely accelerated and transformed that really as a discipline.
I feel like we were going fast enough before COVID, and now it's every year it just gets faster. And the rate of change that we're dealing with and the concepts and the things that are associated with that are pretty challenging to stay on top of. I think we hear all these terms and we have a lot of new entrants to the market. We have a lot of new capabilities that are really being thrust in front of us. And so I think one area that I look at with overseeing the partnership side is like last year at this time, we had a vision to really set out and create a partnership with the team at Snowflake. And one of the things we talked with Patrick about at first was, what do we need to do to stand out? How do we start to look at the way in which we can connect with our customers? Because I think that almost every customer in the room has both of our technologies. And one of the areas we started to look at was we've got to develop uniqueness. We've got to develop a way in which we can connect these capabilities that can delight customers, but also do something that is novel. And so I think when we look at the uniqueness of our offering, I do want to give Patrick a chance to kind of talk about some of the things we view as unique, and then how Rio would see that sort of fitting in as a final question and to help supporting his customers. So,
Yeah, I think when I think about the uniqueness of this offering, so a lot of dynamics going on in the CDP space. There's the concept of composable. There are a couple elements there. One is that this solution is modular. So a lot of people say composable means that you can buy a reverse ETL solution standalone, a segmentation solution, a data collection solution. So that's one layer. The other piece of composable that's often talked about is how does it actually work with your data platform? So is it reducing data movement, reducing data silos, and allowing you to leverage sort of the scale and compute that you've invested in for a solution like Snowflake? So those are the two primary elements, and they get interchanged and used in a lot of different ways. I think what's interesting about the partnership between Snowflake and Telium is on the modularity side, you're actually getting both sides. One, you can get Telium IQ standalone. You could get Audience Stream or Event Stream. But you can also get an all-in-one solution. So you may actually have a full stack approach. And in talking to a lot of brands, we see a lot of enterprises that, to be honest, want an all-in-one solution. In a lot of cases, they don't want to have to manage the complexity of working together. But there are some organizations that want to scale into this. So they're like, I have an acute need for audiencing right now, and eventually I want to add on other capabilities. So you're getting both of those. With what we've launched around Snowpipe streaming and the activation capabilities, you're also have a solution that works well with Snowflake, meaning that we're reducing data copy. We're using efficient ways to ingest data into Snowflake. So the thing about Snowpipe streaming is it is actually cheaper and faster, which is obviously not the typical way that you see those things work. So it is a really efficient way for you to build out a customer 360, your understanding of users within Snowflake, such that you can activate ML use cases and all of those things downstream. So this joint solution is a really interesting opportunity for us to provide brands and organizations with a ton of different flexibility to really drive those CDP use cases.
awesome.
I think one thing that's helped us be successful working with both the organizations is we really pride ourselves in being able to meet organizations where they are. Now, if let's say we're going to go Telium Snowflake, we want to know how to architect this and what components to have around this, we can meet them there. And because this is such a time of change, to your point, like things are changing quickly, we're even having a lot of discussions that are further up. Like, we need to re-architect everything. Everything's on the table. I'm talking to a big publisher now, and they said, we know that when cookies go away, we're going to have to really change the way we operate. We want to know, like, how do we future-proof our entire architecture, across MarTech and AdTech? And we weren't being asked those questions a few years ago, I think, because all the changes happening, the fact that what's happening top of funnel, paid media is now impacting what's happening, CRM and maybe lower funnel. And because of privacy, because of all these other questions about composability, like how do we build the right architecture with the right pieces, with the right capabilities? How do we fit it all together, knowing that things may change in the future? So I think that's those are the questions we're being asked more and more these days. Like, how do we prepare for the future, knowing that the future may change? How do we have a more privacy-first architecture and just the way data is stored, knowing that there may be new privacy laws, right? So, it's exciting times. I think I think we probably have a lot of work in store for us together in the coming years.
Absolutely. Well, the panel may be ending, but the conversation's just starting. So we're going to be taking a break in a minute. That I encourage everybody to connect more with Rio, connect more with Patrick. But thank you both for making the time to come up here and talk with us today.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.